In this video, we're going to be doing the endocrine system part 3, starting at the thyroid gland, which is going to start on, if you have notes in the same sequence as mine, page 3, towards the bottom of page 3. So the first question in the notes is, the thyroid gland consists of two main types of cells. What are they, and which hormone does each produce? So, getting to that. Let me get there. This slide answers the question about the two types of cells, and so make sure you have this. I need to figure out where I'm putting stuff. Hold on. Okay, so biopsy through the thyroid. Let's sort of talk about what we have going on. We have all of these little, I wonder why that's doing weird lines, but that's all right. We have all of these little circles. Each of these little circles is called a follicle. The cells that create the circles are called follicle cells. So each of these little cells with a big old nucleus around them, those are follicle cells. In between the follicles, we have cells that just sort of fill in the gaps between them. Those are these parafollicular cells. They've labeled some of the parafolliculars off down there. The follicle cells secrete this substance that is called thyroglobulin. The thyroglobulin ends up accumulating in the middle of the follicle. It becomes this sort of colloid, almost jello-like stuff in the middle right here. So all this pink goo, this is the thyroglobulin that will eventually, once iodine gets added to it, get converted into the different types of thyroid hormone. I'm going to collectively call triiodothyronine, T3, and thyroxine, T4, thyroid hormone. They essentially are going to be doing the same thing, and so we're just going to talk about them collectively together. But that thyroglobulin is going to get converted into thyroid hormone depending on how many iodines get added to the thyroglobulin. Then the parafollicular cells that are outside of the follicles, they do something completely different. They produce the calcitonin that we talked about last semester that has a bone-sparing effect. It helps to reduce your blood calcium level, putting the calcium from the blood into the bone to make your bones a little bit stronger. That works predominantly as you're a child. Next, how does iodine relate to the thyroid gland? Kind of just said this just a second ago. Iodine is critical for turning the thyroglobulin, that is an inactive compound, into active thyroid hormone that can metabolically do the job that it is supposed to do. If you add 3 iodines to thyroglobulin, it becomes triiodothyronine, or T3 for short. If you add 4 iodines to it, it becomes thyroxine. And again, we're just going to call both T3 and T4 thyroid hormone. So moral of the story is, how does iodine relate? You need iodine to convert thyroglobulin into active thyroid hormone. So you need it for the thyroid gland to do its job, essentially. So the two thyroid hormones collectively, what do they do? Oh my God, everything. It is such an important set of hormones. Essentially, they help to regulate metabolism as a whole around the body. So the more thyroid hormone you release, the higher your metabolic rate is going to be. The more sodium potassium pumps your cells are going to have, and remember, that's an ATP driven pump, and so you're going to be generating more heat the more of those pumps you have. The more cellular respiration your cells are going to end up doing, the more growth your body can end up doing with thyroid hormone that's present, the more heat your body can generate when there's thyroid hormone present, and so it's just an overall driver of metabolism as a whole. Pretty much kind of said this a second ago, but again, your body really cannot function without thyroid hormone. You can't grow correctly without thyroid hormone. You can't hit puberty without thyroid hormone. I mentioned that in either the first or second video when we were talking about permissiveness. Your book has some lovely tables that show you all the different things that thyroid hormone does. Like, I'm just linking us to metabolism, but notice you need it for every system in your body to function like it's supposed to function. And so it's not just about metabolism. You don't work at all without your thyroid hormone in your body at the correct levels. Okay. Hypersecretion. If you secrete too much thyroid hormone, your metabolic rate is going to be too high. And that might sound great, like, yay, I can eat all the cheesecake I want, but it's not. If your metabolic rate is too high, you can have hyperthermia, which is an elevated body temperature. That can lead to excessive sweating. The excessive sweating can lead to dehydration, which can lead to blood pressure issues. You can end up also with what I'm showing you in this picture is exophthalmos, and that's actually one of the most outward signs of Graves' disease, which is the name of the disease that results from hyperthyroidism. The eyes actually start to get fatty tissue build up behind them, and that pushes the eyes forward, and so that's what exophthalmos is, and that's what you're seeing there in that picture. Notice that I've got the treatment up there too. Essentially, if you've got this to a high degree where it's really causing problems, we're going to destroy the thyroid gland so that we can get you back down to something of a normal state. Okay. Hypothyroid disorders are more common, especially as you get older. They are also much more problematic because remember, if you don't have enough thyroid hormone, nothing works or develops correctly, including the nervous system. And so we're going to have major problems that go along with this. Get ready to write down a lot of diseases because there's a lot going on if you don't have enough thyroid hormone. First thing that you're going to notice, if a person does not get enough iodine in their diet, remember that you need the iodine to convert thyroglobulin into thyroid hormone. So what's going to happen is you're not going to be making thyroid hormone. The body's going to know there's a problem, and it's going to up the production of thyroglobulin, but you already had thyroglobulin. You weren't converting it to thyroid hormone, so you're going to start to balloon the thyroid gland with excess amounts of thyroglobulin that you just can't convert to functional hormone because you don't have iodine to do that. So the thyroid gland will literally balloon out the front of the neck. That's a goiter. A goiter is a hypothyroid disorder because you're not making the thyroid hormone because you don't have the iodine to do that. So this is a symptom of something else that is going on, and it's the lack of iodine in the diet. So notice the swollen neck that we have going on right there. That is a goiter. Now we're going to have a lot of other major problems that go along with this, but again, this is an outward sign that we've got a major issue that's going to be coming. Now, myxedema is what we see in adults who aren't producing thyroid hormone. What I'm showing you here is the edema and the thickened, puffy, dry skin that tends to result from the lack of thyroid hormone that ends up developing. The low metabolic rate ends up resulting in fatigue and just, I'm too tired to do anything sort of stuff. The GI tract doesn't move like it's supposed to, so that ends up resulting in constipation, and that constipation can be very, very problematic because it can end up resulting in obstruction that can be fatal if it is bad enough. Let me talk about this mental sluggishness off down here. I don't know how many of you have had COVID. COVID ends up resulting in what some people call COVID brain or COVID fog. This is sort of the same thing. It's your brain is still, like, all your memories are still there, all your thoughts are still there, but it's slower. Like, you're not making the connections as fast as you used to be able to. That's what happens in a person who has myxedema and low thyroid hormone as they get older. Like, everything is there, but they're not making those connections as fast, and they're getting really frustrated by the fact that their brain is just not connecting the dots like it used to be able to. They are not mentally challenged. They are not lower IQ. They're just a little bit foggy, I guess, is the way that I would tend to describe that. If we were to give them the thyroid hormone they need, which in the United States we can do that, that mental sluggishness would be reversed because it's not brain damage. It's slowing down is essentially how that's going to work. The goiter will also be present in a person who has myxedema, and so keep that in mind as well. So this is a thyroid that's been removed. Notice it's huge. These follicles should not be this big, but that's what's happened is we didn't have what we needed to produce the thyroid hormone, and so all the follicles became gigantic. This is the normal picture that I showed you guys earlier with nice, normal, happy follicles. This is a biopsy through a person who has myxedema and goiter, and notice they're huge follicles. They are misshapen. Sometimes we've got follicles that are swallowed within follicles. Everything is just gigantic, essentially. And so that's what a thyroid gland looks like in a person who has goiter and myxedema. Now, that was, you had made it through childhood, things had developed correctly, and then you stopped producing thyroid hormone. Cretinism is different. This is, you did not make it through childhood. You did not produce enough thyroid hormone as you were developing, and as a result, you did not develop correctly. Your bones are misshapen. You're going to have a shorter stature. Your organs did not form like they were supposed to. So this mental retardation, this is different from mental sluggishness. Your brain did not develop correctly. After this happens, we can try to supplement you all day long. You're still going to be mentally retarded for the rest of your life if you have developed cretinism. So this is why it's really important that we end up doing screenings and tests on babies and making sure that everybody's getting everything they need in the diet that they're consuming. Because once this problem develops, you can't fix it once the damage is done. So cretinism is not something we see in the United States very often. But if you travel to other countries where they don't have the medical system that we do, you can still find it, unfortunately. And so this is, again, notice big old huge goiter coming off the front of the neck. She has a goiter. It's smaller on her side. I know it's hard to tell because they're standing right next to each other and there's not really a height thing next to them, but they are shorter in stature. Their bones are a little bit misshapen. They do have the myxedema going on as well. So cretinism can lead to myxedema as they get older, but the cretinism it's what develops in childhood. All right. That was thyroid hormone in a nutshell. Again, very important hormone, a lot of stuff going on. Calcitonin up next, we talked about the first time back in AMP1 when we were talking about blood, so I'll kind of blow past it fairly quickly. It lowers your blood calcium levels by putting the calcium from blood into the bones to make your bones stronger. Not only that, but it does also inhibit your osteoclast, so you slow down the process of tearing down your bones, and so your bones just stay stronger all around. So again, bone-sparing effect. We're not really going to talk about diseases for calcitonin because we hit on those just a little bit last semester. Okay, on the back of the thyroid gland, remember different people have a different number. The book shows you 4 because that's on average how many people have, but it can be anywhere from 2 to 8 parathyroid glands that people can have on the back of the thyroid. The parathyroid glands, let's see, do I ask you any questions about those? Oh yeah, what are the 2 types of cells present in the parathyroid gland? Oxyphil cells. We still don't know what they do. I read journals all the time, and I can't say that I've seen a bunch of research on what they're doing. So I don't know if we'll ever know what they do because I'm not seeing people studying the oxyphil cells to find out what they do. What used to be called chief cells, but are now being called parathyroid cells. I'm telling you that because I'll still call them chief cells. It's what I was taught, but your book has now switched the name over to parathyroid cells. These are the ones that produce parathyroid hormone or parathormone or PTH. That is the antagonist to calcitonin. So what PTH does is increase your blood calcium levels. It does that by stimulating osteoclast activity so that you tear down bone, taking the calcium from it and releasing it into the bloodstream to increase your blood calcium levels. So this is going to make your bones weaker. PTH does also help activate vitamin D. Vitamin D activation involves several organs. So remember we talked a little bit about your skin when you go out into sunlight can start the process of converting cholesterol into cholecalciferol. And then both the liver and the kidneys can also then help convert the cholecalciferol into active vitamin D. PTH is part of that pathway of converting the cholecalciferol into active vitamin D. And so it's getting us closer to actual vitamin D that's going to help us absorb calcium from the foods we eat into the bloodstream. And so that's another way that it helps us get calcium higher in the bloodstream. Should you secrete too much parathyroid hormone, you're going to weaken those bones way past where they should be. Think of it like osteoporosis times 100. Your blood calcium level can also skyrocket, and that's actually more of a problem because if your blood calcium level gets too high, it can cause heart arrhythmias to the point of heart failure, and it can also cause tetanic muscle contractions, and those aren't good either. These 2 pictures are actually the same guy. He developed a tumor in one of his parathyroid glands, and you can see he had been a healthy guy off over here, but once he developed the tumors, the parathyroid hormone ate away at his bones. His clavicles broke. His mandible was basically just completely eaten away. His teeth have all fallen out in both the maxilla and the mandible as those bones weakened. His humerus is broken on this side. It's not strong enough to support the weight. Sternum, not doing great either. So you can see just how bad the bones get when a person has hyperparathyroidism. Won't talk a lot about hypoparathyroidism, but a person would end up getting hypocalcemia. Again, problems that go along with that, because now we don't have the calcium that we need where we need it to be. So you've got what's going on there. Let's see, I'm gonna also in this video go ahead and cover the adrenal glands. First thing that I give you for the adrenal glands is this picture right here to label. First and foremost, the adrenal glands are divided into a cortex and a medulla. The cortex has 3 zones, so everything from here up is the cortex, and then this is the adrenal medulla. The cortex's zones are divided based on the hormone produced and then the cellular arrangement. And unfortunately, in real life, it can be hard for people to see what's going on. So I like the cartoony picture off over here. But the zona glomerulosa has these little tubes that you can see here, and you can kind of see them here. So there's a tube, there's a tube, there's a tube. You sometimes have to have a little imagination to see them because we cut through them irregularly, but there are tubes. So from about here to about there is the zona glomerulosa. Now, off to the other side of your picture, what I need you guys to write on this side is the hormone secreted by the zona glomerulosa is aldosterone. You can see that in the table just below if you don't know how to spell that. Okay, zona fasciculata. We've got these elongated tubes that are going up and down. That is so much harder to see off over here on this side. But there's no circles like what we had up there. I've never really seen the tubes like what it shows off over there. But here's the thing. You can see pretty clearly this line where things get darker. And you can see we've lost our rings up here. And so in between where we've lost our rings and where things get darker, that's the zona fasciculata. Off on this side, you need to make a note that the hormone produced in the zona fasciculata is cortisol. That's C-O-R-T-I-S-O-L. This dark stripe right here, the zona reticularis, the hormone produced there are collectively known as androgens. Those are some sex hormones. And then the adrenal medulla is going to produce a set of hormones called catecholamines. Just put epi beside that one for now. It's epi and norepi, or adrenaline and noradrenaline, whichever one really kind of makes you happy. So that's what's going on in the adrenal cortex. Now, for the mineralocorticoids, so corticoids. All of our corticoids are going to be steroid hormones. Everything produced by the adrenal gland is a steroid-based hormone. When it says mineral at the front, it means it is a steroid hormone concerned with minerals. And for the one that we're going to talk about, which is aldosterone, I'm once again going to recommend you star it, highlight it, do something. It's one of those hormones you've never heard of before, but it's going to come back to us in 3 or 4 chapters throughout the rest of AMP2. It is that important of a hormone. It is concerned with sodium ion specifically. It is released at the same time that you release ADH. So anytime you start to get dehydrated, your blood pressure starts to drop, you're going to release both aldosterone and ADH simultaneously, and they are both going to help you conserve your water, but they're going to do it in 2 separate ways. ADH helps you reabsorb water straight up as is. Aldosterone helps you reabsorb sodium. And if you remember from AMP1, wherever sodium goes, water wants to follow it. So by you moving sodium, water will follow it. It reminds me of that Field of Dreams movie. Build it and they will come. Move the sodium and the water will follow. And so that's what aldosterone is going to be doing. And it's doing that in the kidneys. And so reabsorption of sodium to help you keep your blood pressure up by keeping your blood volume up. That is what aldosterone is going to do. Hypersecretion is called aldosteronism, and it will cause hypertension. If you're unfamiliar with hypertension, that is high blood pressure. High blood pressure tends to lead to edema, which is fluid swelling around the body. We're not going to talk about hyposecretion of aldosterone because it tends to not be a problem. Okay, next up, glucocorticoids. Remember, corticoid means steroid, gluco means glucose, so this is a sugar-regulating steroid hormone. This hormone is going to do the same thing that glucagon is going to do for us, but this one does it in response to stress. Basically, all of the adrenal gland is in response to stress, but this one is blood sugar in response to stress. Aldosterone was blood pressure in response to stress, which dehydration is a stress response if you're unfamiliar with that. So here's how cortisol works. Anytime you have not been eating for a while, starvation and hunger, that's a stress response. So when you have gone longer than 8 hours without food, your adrenal glands are going to start to up the production of cortisol so that you can maintain your blood sugar level where it's supposed to be, because your brain has to have blood sugar. It cannot really use any other fuel to power the neurons that power the brain. And so we got to release that cortisol to keep our blood sugar where we need it to be. The cortisol is going to be doing that really only when we have been doing the fasting thing for an extended period of time. So here's what this shows you. People don't tend to eat while they're sleeping. So notice right after you wake up, that's usually when your cortisol levels are highest for the day. This is one of the reasons why there's a whole breakfast is the most important meal of the day thing. When you eat breakfast right after you wake up, that helps to lower your cortisol levels back down. That helps you regulate your stress response and get your blood sugar back to where it's supposed to be. This just shows you that there's different research into cortisol levels. This is showing you that people who are addicted to drugs, whenever they are doing their drugs or receiving their drug cues, their cortisol levels are actually lower versus when they are stressed in between drugs or thinking about, oh my God, how am I going to get my next hit? Their cortisol levels are actually higher. And so that's one of the reasons why addiction is as painful as it is cortisol also plays a role in that particular stress response. This is how cortisol helps you maintain your blood sugar levels. So let me mention, we're going to have a bunch of what I like to call big G words in this class. Gluconeogenesis is the first one that we're really hitting on. But if you break it down, it is not that big, scary a word. Genesis, making. Neo, new. Gluco, sugar. So this is making new sugar from things that aren't sugar. So it's converting fats to sugars, converting proteins to sugars. This is where your body starts to take the fat that you've been storing in your body and turning it into sugar so that your neurons don't starve to death, and doing the same thing with proteins inside of your body. So this is where your body is starting to catabolize itself or eat itself to keep your blood sugar level where it's supposed to be. Now, one of the either upsides or downsides, depending on where you are in this, is cortisol also suppresses your immune system. Because if you're starving to death, we got bigger fish to fry than, oh, we might have COVID. It's ignore COVID and let's try to find food and keep our blood sugar where it's supposed to be. So cortisol suppresses your immune response and it is an anti-inflammatory. That can be beneficial for us. And so if you guys remember last semester, we talked about autoimmune diseases. We specifically talked about rheumatoid arthritis. Well, a lot of our steroid-based hormones are sort of cortisol or glucocorticoid based. We will give people these hormones to suppress their immune system to alleviate their symptoms while they're having flare-ups of their disease. Yes, it will play with their blood sugar, but it will also suppress their immune system. But here's the flip side of that. If you're on a diet, let's say, and you're keeping your stress level up while you're on that diet so you can lose weight, what's that doing to your immune system? It's suppressing your immune system as well, so you are more likely to get sick and stay sick for longer while you are on that diet, unless you do it in such a way as to keep your cortisol levels down. And so that's something that people have to sort of keep in mind is nutrition, stress, and immunity. They all go hand in hand. Okay, Cushing's. We're going to put this in the box next to cortisol, but Cushing's really is an aldosterone, a cortisol, and an ACTH problem, all sort of wrapped up together in some cases. Cushing's syndrome is usually a tumor develops someplace in the adrenal gland that is both adjacent to the zona glomerulosa and the zona fasciculata. So the person will produce too much cortisol and too much aldosterone. So the symptoms are going to involve both of those hormones. And so it's going to play around with their sodium levels, which is going to play around with their water retention, which is where the edema comes from. It's also going to play around with their blood sugar levels, which is where the hyperglycemia mentioned on this slide comes from. So here in this case, this little girl here, she has Cushing syndrome. The reason she is so swollen, she has what is sometimes called a swollen moon face. That's the edema that is the result of the excess aldosterone that is causing her to retain water. And so that's a characteristic of Cushing syndrome. Sometimes people with Cushing's will get what is sort of rudely called a buffalo hump. I think I will show you that on another picture. I can't remember if I have that on a later slide or not. But the hyperglycemia, that's really problematic. The losses in muscle and bone, those are very, very problematic. And so this is something that does need treatment. And so notice it's actually pretty easy for us to treat. We're just going to give them, we're just going to remove the tumor. Let me say it the correct way. We're usually just going to remove the tumor that was causing the problem. And then voila, they are cured. All right. This is actually the same boy, a before and after picture. This, I wish I had, left is when he was diagnosed. Right is okay, no, it's drawn on the right side. The right is 4 months later. So, here's the thing. He had a tumor, just like I was just saying. The tumor was mass producing both aldosterone and cortisol. They removed the tumor, and this again was not, he was overweight. Well, now where'd my drawings go? Now my thingy doesn't want to work. There we go. This was not, he was overweight because he was eating too much or anything. This was, he was overweight because of an excess amount of water that was being stored in his body because of the sodium reabsorption. So once the tumor was removed, he was able to get rid of all of that water, and voila, he's cured and all back to normal up over there. So again, fairly easy to treat as long as that tumor is operable, essentially. This picture is showing you that buffalo hump that I was talking about. It ends up being a little fat pad right over C7. And so that's another characteristic that can go along for Cushing's syndrome. All right, on the hyposecretion side of the cortisol, we have Addison's disease. Not a super common disease, but it does tend to play around with their glucose and sodium levels. It will drop both of those levels. Again, notice the sodium is because this does also play around with aldosterone as well. We're just going to give them the hormones that they are not producing enough of, and that's pretty much going to solve their problems. For the androgens or gonatocorticoids, testosterone is produced in both sexes here in the zona reticularis. It is produced also in the testes for men, so men do end up producing more testosterone than women, but like I said, both men and women do produce testosterone here in the adrenal glands. The androgens that are produced here do end up helping to contribute to the onset of puberty, although the gonads play a much bigger role in that, in all honesty. The little bit of androgens produced here do also help with the appearance of secondary sex characteristics. Since this is the first time I'm saying secondary sex characteristics, I think, let's talk about what those are. Primary sex characteristics are the gonads. Gonads for men, testes. For ladies, ovaries, and let me be super clear, I'm talking about cis males, cis females. Those are the primaries. Secondary sex characteristics are everything else that make a person the gender they are that aren't the primary. So penis is a secondary sex characteristic, vagina, secondary sex characteristic, uterus, breasts, pubic hair patterns, all of that stuff, it's all secondary sex characteristics. And so all of those things, it is the sex hormones that help drive the formation, creation of those things. Should you secrete too much of the androgens, it can cause masculinization. I actually just really, I like this picture. It has nothing to do with these hormones, but you know, if you see a picture like this, you're thinking, hey, there's a manly man. Look at the size of those balls. But no, he actually has a filaria worm. This is a weird placement for elephantiasis is what he's got going on, but masculinization. That masculinization in men, can actually end up leading to baldness, because as it turns out, male pattern baldness is the result of high testosterone, not low testosterone. In women, though, the high testosterone levels will cause an excess of hair, especially facial hair, and so it does different things in different sexes. Let's see, next up, adrenal medulla. The adrenal medulla is straight up stress, fight or flight hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine. When I say fight or flight, again, I always link this to bears because bears are like my greatest fear, even though I don't live in a bear place. If a bear just walks up to me, I really don't know what I would do. I would like to, actually, I think I do, because I did run up on a pack of coyotes once and I turned and ran away, which is not the thing you're supposed to do when you run into a pack of coyotes, P.S. So I would probably turn and run away and then get eaten by a bear. because that's also not what you're supposed to do when you run into a bear. So I'm a fleer is the moral of the story. If you are a fleer, well, you need to get your blood sugar up so that your muscles can have all the ATP they need in order for you to run away. So your blood sugar is going to rise so that your muscles can do that. Your blood vessels are going to constrict so that you can keep your blood pressure up so that we can deliver oxygen to the muscles so that you can run away from said bear. The heart is going to beat faster so that your pulse stays up, so your blood pressure stays up so that you can run away from the bear. Your respiratory rate is going to increase. Your pupils are going to constrict. All the things that go along with a fight or flight response, the epinephrine or norepinephrine are both going to do that for you here. Okay. To try to separate them out just a little bit, here's kind of what I want you to know. Epinephrine is really more about the heart specifically. In fact, when a person is having heart problems, epinephrine is what we go to get the heart to beat more forcefully. And, well, really more forcefully is how I'm going to stick on that one. It stimulates the heart. Epinephrine also is like if you've ever had an asthmatic person in your life, those inhalers, well, albuterol, or whatever, cymbuterol, there's a bazillion different brands of those things. That's a modified epinephrine. It opens up the airway. So heart and lungs, epinephrine. Norepinephrine is more about blood vessels. What they do is constrict to keep blood vessels, blood pressure up, pardon me. So here's basically where I wanted you to get that stuff, everything that I just said. Epinephrine, heart and lungs, norepinephrine, blood vessels. That's the key difference between those two. But moral of the story is you're going to release both of them at the same time, and they're really both converging on the same thing, which is that fight or flight response. Pretty rare, but if a person does secrete too much of those, they're going to be kept in the fight or flight response all day, every day. So blood pressure is going to constantly be high, metabolic rate constantly be high. They're basically going to be fairly unhappy people. Hyposecretion is not generally problematic, I guess, unless a bear comes up and then they can't generate that fight or flight response. But again, not really hugely problematic. Let's see. The only other thing you got in that table is pineal. So I'll go ahead and bust out pineal gland as the last thing for this particular video. Pineal gland produces melatonin. Melatonin is primarily a circadian rhythm hormone. It does help to make you sleepy. Whenever the amount of light outside starts to go down, the amount of melatonin starts to increase. And as a result, you start to get sleepy and then you go to sleep. You don't really have to worry about hypo or hypersecretion of melatonin. The only thing, and I really do talk about this in AMP1, but just to hit it again, because nurses have to do this stuff all the time. If you ever are doing shift work and you get moved to another shift and you are having problems sleep adjusting, try melatonin. It can help a lot of people when they are shift adjusted, get the sleep that they are missing. Just try to make sure you're getting a reputable brand, because there's a lot of shady stuff out there on the supplement market. Melatonin can be a pretty safe sleep aid, and it's not as addictive as some of the other things. Like Ambien is scary. I don't know if you guys have ever been on Ambien or seen a patient on Ambien. Melatonin is way preferable to Ambien if you have to do that. Jet lag also, if you're traveling to a place that is like more than 5 hours different from where you currently live, take some melatonin with you. It can help you do the sleep adjustment when you are traveling long distances like that. That's all I wanted to cover in this particular video, because pancreas got a lot going on, so we'll talk about that one in the next video.